how disappointed were you when you got the CFL on TSN schedule and it read Ferguson next to you?
You know what? I've actually been looking forward to this one, my friend. I've had these veteran play-by-play guys, right? Rod Black for many years, a number of games with Rod Smith, obviously some games with CC in the past, and I mean those guys, they all have seniority at the network. So I finally get to be the veteran guy, break it in my rookie, and I'm very much looking forward to the hazing process.
Good. I'm excited to see what you come up with for me. I'm fully expecting somebody to, step on my shoes as I'm trying to dive back in, coming back from commercial breaks or something like that. But it will be a lot of fun. We've got the BC Ottawa game for those of you who are not aware. I personally was super excited because when you've been my favorite analyst at TSN for a long time and a lot of stuff, I mean, any sport right up there with Jack Armstrong, I just think the way that you approach the game and the way you try to be honest, but also celebrate the league itself is something that, this a lot of fans appreciate. I mean, you don't run into a whole lot of people that are disappointed with the way that you do this job. And I got to experience that firsthand in Toronto last Saturday, where we're trying to get the hell out of the stadium and you couldn't get 10 feet without somebody wanting to shake your hand or take a picture. So it's really, really a joy to be on this broadcast with you, honestly, man.
Oh, thank you. I'm looking forward to it too. Quite honestly, I have enjoyed your work for a long time. Obviously, we've sort of worked together and around draft stuff for a lot of years. So I guess we should apologize to people in advance if they get a lot of draft history conversation on during Saturday's broadcast. But no, love your stuff, follow your stuff all the time, and looking forward to this. I think we're going to have some fun.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm excited to get into the rhythm of it. I think the important thing that I learned from, there was a lot of things, but I went and had lunch with Chris Cuthbert when I found out I was going to get to call some games. Went to his place, sat on the back deck, and he said, the really important thing is to get off to a good start. And he said, and you probably experienced this too early in your days where it's like, let's just get the first quarter rolling and see what happens. And he said, I used to love doing the player intros. He said when he was early on in the 90s, he used to love asking, can I do the player intros? Because it'll get me into a rhythm. I get to say everybody's name and then we're off and running sort of thing. Tell me about your introduction to the big TV game, the big show.
Well, see, for me, it started a little bit smaller in that I started off at the Score.
Yep.
It's a smaller network, and I guess especially doing live stuff, doing color on games. We were doing University Rush, so covering OUA games. Those were our nationally televised games on Saturday afternoon with one of my favorite guys, Tim McAuliffe was my play-by-play guy. And so the first game that we're doing actually is York at Waterloo on a Saturday afternoon. It's at in Waterloo. I guess in those days it was Seagram Stadium.
Yep,
they called it back in the day. And the booth is like, relative to what we get to work in CFL stadiums, we feel a little spoiled compared to what you get in some Canadian university stadiums. And so I'm in a situation where Tim and I are in a room with kind of doors on either side of us, and basically the coach's spotters booth for one team is on one side of us, the spotters booth for the other team is the other side of us, and there's this small room in between, and our booth is literally so small that my telestrator is actually in another room. So when I'm telestrating plays, I have to go through this door. But the thing is, this is not a regulation door. This door is not to code. So the top of the door comes to about here. And you can imagine how many times in my haste to try to get from talking to Tim and looking at my board in front of me to get to that telestrator, how many times I do not bend down fast enough to get through the door. There were probably times where I was semi-conscious doing my drawings on the telestrator because I've whacked my head on the top of the door frame.
Yeah, those university booths, some of them are not the friendliest in the world. I think back to when the very first time I got into calling games officially on TSN radio in Hamilton. I was the McMaster play-by-play guy, and it was the first year that I was done being a university football player, right? So I'm talking about all these guys every single week, week in, week out. Asher Hastings is smashing the all-time CIS U Sports touchdown record of Chris Flynn, which I thought was an untouchable record. So I'm calling history in front of myself every week. And my first experience was outside on the balcony at Laurier, which you probably have experience, I'm guessing, too. And a windy day up there in Kitchener-Waterloo, and same thing, you're just you're going, man, I'm glad we're here. This is great to bring this to people, but this is not ideal. And then you look at the palaces that you get when you're calling CFL games that are 30 feet wide. And I mean, even the radio booth in places like Winnipeg and Saskatchewan, sometimes you walk in, you're like, I don't need all of this room. Why is this here?
Yeah, no, exactly. It's there's a lot of mileage, I guess, in the world of Canadian football between, grassroots and the Canadian Football League, not just on the field, but in the broadcast booth as well.
Yeah, no doubt. I wanted to ask you as well. You brought up the telestrator, which made me laugh on the inside thinking about your first foray into telestrating this year, where you decided to click on an official and then you just did a mea culpa. And, I'm sorry, guys, it's been a long time. What has been the part of getting back into calling games after a season off for the first time since you've been in this business that you found most difficult or interesting?
Yeah, one of the things that I have kind of said from the start is that, I wouldn't even necessarily call it difficult, but maybe that I don't like or is kind of weird is one of the things that I have always said about football. The best part of the game of football is the people in the world of football, and the same kind of goes for the broadcast part of it, like that. The crew that we have on the truck and the crew that we sort of travel with on a week-to-week basis, that you look forward to those in-person interactions. From a football sense, you get down on the field, you get down there the day before a game, and you get to have some conversations with players and coaches, or get down on the field a couple hours before game time, and same thing, you get players, coaches, officials, the whole bit. Game day and the day before, as I said, like kind of interacting with our crew and so on. And leading up to the season this year, I guess it was probably the third game of the year before I did a game. So the first couple of games I had watched on TV, and as obviously a lifelong fan of the CFL, I'm enjoying the fact that football is back and that I'm getting to watch CFL football and loving that. But at the same time, leading up to my first game, I was excited for the game to happen, but I wasn't necessarily excited to call the game, because it didn't have, up until that point, it didn't have the people. Everything had been by Zoom calls or conference calls and so on. And so that was what didn't really feel right to me. But then we get to the stadium on game day and sort of check in at the truck before the game and get to see our crew, producers, directors, ISO directors, all the crew down there getting set up for the game. I get to see those guys in person, and that feels good. And you get up to the booth and you've got the rest of your crew up in the booth, stats guys, camera people, and so on. And you get people, and so that's where it all starts to feel better and starts to feel normal. But at the same time, because we're not right now with the protocols that are in place, where we don't get the face-to-face time that we usually get with players and coaches, still get to talk to those guys, but that's something that I miss, because I think, as I said, the best part of football is the people in and around it.
Yeah, no doubt. I love that answer. And I also agree with you in the sense that one of my favorite things, any person who is a former player at whatever level, whether it's yourself in the Canadian Football League, myself in U Sports, you love wandering around on the field pregame, right? Because you just run into people. It's a gold mine of, you could say, content, but really it's a gold mine of conversation. Just being able to not even necessarily rub shoulders with people and be seen, but it's about going there and saying, I might only see this person, Chris Hagerman, for example, that works within the Edmonton Elks organization in the front office. He went to my high school. Like, I know Chris from when he was at Frontenac Secondary School. I don't see Chris. I don't reach out to Chris. We don't exchange texting or emails. We see each other on the field pregame once a year when Edmonton would come to Hamilton. Well, first of all, I haven't had that in a couple of years. Second of all, I'm not going to have that anytime soon, right? And it's because we're not able to, people might not know this, but from the booth, we can't just go wander around the field, because it's a secure environment where they have restricted that to tier 1, as they call it, which is the players and the sideline reporters and coaches and training staff. And that's all for a good purpose. But yeah, it certainly does limit those unique conversations that you have, because, we can do all the prep that we want and do, several hours throughout the week getting ready for a game. The most interesting stuff you find out, it's 15 minutes before the game starts, standing down there at the 55-yard line.
Yeah, well, I've often thought, so much of it, whether it's, as you said, like during pregame on game day, depending who you run into, or sometimes it's the conversations. It may be guys that we've brought in for interviews, but I have often wished that there was sort of a camera other than the camera that we're filming the interviews with, where people could kind of see just what the dynamics are, the interactions are, the conversations that take place with some of these players in the room. That, I think that we do a pretty good job of conveying the personalities of many of the players. But within a game broadcast, there are only certain clips you can use, right? They can only be so long and have to sort of fit with a theme that comes up in the game. You can't force things. But I often wish sometimes that fans could really get a look at how well-rounded some of these guys are, and the things that they speak intelligently about, or just some of the funny conversations you have getting to know guys and so on is such a great part of having the opportunity to do this job.
Before we do talk a little bit of football here, I want to ask you one more question about the production, because my first experience with it was last Saturday in terms of kind of being on the headset and hearing the air traffic controller extraordinaire and Chris Edwards, and obviously John Hines and what he does in the backgrounds, and all the great producers, directors, and the people in the truck that make us look a hell of a lot smarter and smoother than we actually are. What do you want people to know that are CFL fans listening to this podcast that they probably don't about the thing they're watching each week? Because you've lived inside of this and you've seen it evolve and grow and improve and change. And I just feel like there's so much that people don't know about the effort that goes into bringing you the thing that so many of us take for granted because it's just been available for so long.
Yeah. And I think that you touched on it, is the number of people who are involved behind the scenes that people never really get to know. And we honestly do now sort of try to make a concerted effort, I would say at times, to sort of make mention of, hey, this is who our stats guy is today, and this is who our producer is today, this is who our director is today. Because I think so often you watch sports at home and people think of it as this two-person operation. It's the play-by-play guy and the analyst, and it's kind of like nobody else is involved. But people have to realize that, ISO directors, replay director, all of the number of people who are down in that television broadcasting truck, even the number of people who are in the booth with us that are kind of extra sets of eyes.
What are they all doing, Dwayne? They're all I walked in there the other day, there's 15 people, and I'm like, what's everyone doing in here?
Hey, this is like year 14 at TSN for me. Several years at the Score before that. I still haven't figured out all of their jobs. I just know that on game day, I don't want to be without any of them.
Yes, they're vital. They are essential, as I think we've learned a lot of jobs are over the last year and a half here. But yeah, it's amazing to see the amount of, and the thing that really jumped out to me, again, peeling back the curtain, because I thought this would be a fun way to have you on and tell people some about the production of how this goes on. I was mind blown when I got an email on Tuesday saying, hey guys, when we come back from breaks on Saturday night, here's the visuals that we'll be running. Because every television broadcast I've ever been a part of, they might show it to you 10 seconds before, they might show it to you a half hour before, maybe an hour and a half before, but it's never that scripted, that well planned, that produced, that refined. And throughout the week, I've already learned this week, it gets taken from, hey, here's the base idea, to, well, let's change this, let's tweak this, let's make this smaller, let's make this bigger, let's make sure. And then it's do, and it gets down to the bottom, and that's what makes it to television.
Yeah. I mean, it is not just a matter of showing up and talking about the game. And it's, obviously you go into the game, you want to plan, you want to be prepared, what the storylines are, statistical background, whatever backgrounds, knowledge of players and so on. Sometimes it can be easy to get bogged down in that stuff when ultimately, one of the things, that I was taught, I guess, relatively early in my time at TSN, and we had a producer that worked with us at that time, Mitch Kersner. And Mitch was a guy who was very much kind of in the moment and sort of let the game be the story. And, and that's one of the things that I try to keep in mind too, is you may come in with some storylines that you think are going to play out, but ultimately, as you said, sometimes you might find something out right before the game that becomes critical to what unfolds in the game, or just plays that happen in the game. You kind of let the players and coaches go out there and tell the story.
Well, even last Saturday, we're in different booths, but we're calling the same game. And I'm fully expecting it to be all about Zach Collaros creating and Darvin Adams blowing up the Argos defense and the talented receiving group in Toronto. And it's like, no, it's just going to be DJ Foster. Sorry,
Yeah.
who? Like I wasn't really familiar with DJ Foster going into that. I had him on my depth chart, didn't have a lot of background. And first commercial break after he scores that first touchdown for Toronto, I'm Googling DJ Foster for more information because I'm thinking to myself, this is going to be an important part of this game. And I had
Yeah.
done my prep and I was aware of him and all, but I didn't have enough on him. And that's
Okay.
where it's like, and another thing I think I've learned from Chris Cuthbert was you better have something on everybody because you don't know who's going to be the star.
Yep. Yeah. No, you never know it. It could be anything. I mean, this is a league. Things happen fast. There are a lot of plays in the course of a game, and as you said, you never know who's going to be involved in them. It could be something like an injury, right? It's not always necessarily a great play that leads you to talk about a guy, but you want to make sure that yeah, you know how he got here and sort of what his story is, football wise, and as much as you can on a personal level to be able to speak about him, because there are a lot of people who are counting on you for that information.
Yeah, absolutely. We will leave the Ottawa, BC stuff alone for now. We'll just leave that as a tease for you because we're going to talk about that obviously on the night of the broadcast. But I wanted to bounce around some other things and get your opinion on, Dwayne, that are kind of main storylines throughout the early season. The first being Saskatchewan's the only undefeated team at this point, and I was talking to DT on Wednesday on our podcast here on Canadian Football Perspective about why is Saskatchewan number one in power rankings? Are they actually the best team in the CFL at this point? And I said unquestionably yes. And it's easy to say that because they're 3-0 and because they're playing at home and all the rest. But for me, it's that Cody Fajardo is taking what basically Trevor Harris was with Jason Moss in Edmonton, and he's adding his own playmaking flair to it. There's 3, 4, 5 off-script plays that he's making per game right now that are separating him and allowing them to make up maybe for the offensive line not being perfect and solidified and more veteran. Maybe make up for having Shaq Evans out of the game like they did this past week against Ottawa. Is he the key to just everything in Saskatchewan?
On the offensive side of the ball, for sure. And obviously, the offense being able to control the ball as they do, Cody being able to do some of the things he does that you alluded to extend drives, keep drives alive, that quite frankly keep their defense off the field, which allows them to do some of the things that they do at a very high level. There was a play that came up. I did the Hamilton game in Regina a couple of weeks ago, and there was a play where Cody had a scramble they had been pinned by a punt deep in their own territory.
Yeah.
And Cody had a scramble for about 20 yards to kind of get them out from under their own, from out of the shadow of the goalposts. And they ended up ultimately punting on that possession. But him using his legs to pick up a first down, move the sticks, kind of shift that field position significantly, made a difference, because it meant that you're not punting from a situation where you were deciding, okay, are we taking a safety or are we punting to them where they are already within field goal range? Essentially, one play with his ad lib ability took points off the board quite directly for the Hamilton Tiger Cats. And it's a small thing, and sometimes you don't necessarily make the connection at that time, but it's part of what he brings to the table. And I mean, he's a guy, I've told people this story before, but I remember being asked the question. It was, I guess this would have been 2018, and I was asked the question by a CFL general manager, just in a casual conversation. Who do you think is the best backup quarterback in the league? Who's the best guy who's not playing right now? And I think at the time people are looking for me to give my sort of Johnny Manziel should be on the field somewhere at that time, right? Manziel was kind of the big story, and Jonathan Jennings wasn't really playing in BC, I guess, at that time. And so there were bigger names certainly out there. And I said, the guy that has always intrigued me from his time in Toronto is Cody Fajardo. And I just think he's a guy whose skill set is so perfect for this league. And in the small bits that I've seen, one of the things that stood out for me was exactly what you talked about, Marsh, is that ability to make things happen when things go off script. And that is such a huge part of the Canadian Football League. But you combine what he does as a passer with what he is able to do in ad lib and what he's able to do in terms of called quarterback runs and the threat that he presents overall. I mean, I mean, it's a few weeks into the season, and so we're not gonna do an MOP vote or anything right now. But I think that the argument would certainly be that Cody Fajardo has been the most impressive player in the Canadian Football League so far in 2021.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. That run, by the way, from his own goal line, the reason that I was pantomiming for anybody who's watching us on the YouTube edition of the podcast here, when I did the backhand flip, it's because I watched back the ground level camera of that, and I was mind blown, Dwayne, that as he's breaking out, and I learned this as a quarterback a long time ago, you can be 50 yards down the field, and if you pump fake, there'll be one DB who will jump, even though
Yeah.
you can't throw the ball. So, Cody breaks out of the pocket because the second that the guard gets moved, or, the guard moves the defensive tackle and he sees a lane, boom, gone. And so he takes off through that hole and he's running to the left, but Ja'Gared Davis had dropped out from defensive end. So now Ja'Gared Davis is coming downhill towards Cody, and Cody's running at him at full speed. And then Cody stutters his feet, takes the ball, full hand, like fake flips it backwards as if he's actually pitching it to somebody, freezes Ja'Gared Davis with that move, and then runs away from him down the sideline. And I played it back 20 damn times because I just kept thinking, man, if that was me, I think I'd slide. I was like, I don't know if I. No, I mean, you would just run through his chest because you're you. But if it were me, like, I don't know if I would ever have obviously the confidence in your speed to get around the edge. B, the confidence to know that you can do that with the football and not fumble it down to your own goal line, because then you're giving up minimum 3, max 7. And the idea that you would be able to do that at full speed, he's making decisions so quickly right now. The other one against Hamilton in the game you called was where the snap comes in low on him and he puts his head down and spins the ball to find the laces. And when he turns his head back up to throw a quick game slant to the left, there's a defensive tackle free in his face. Well, he just does a spin and runs through the middle of the field and takes off. And you're like, every other quarterback, maybe other than Vernon Adams Jr. and maybe Masoli when fully healthy, that's just a sack. And you're stuck in the backfield. So he's giving them, I think, that ability to do some different things, certainly, that are changing it up. And on top of that, you got Jason Moss, right, who's running this efficient passing attack where he's going 30 of 35 against Saskatchewan in that game as well. Or with Saskatchewan, I should say.
Yeah. No, those two have proven to be a very good match. And, I mean, this is actually a great conversation to have with you as a former quarterback and a guy who obviously watches and understands that position so well. As I have become a believer in recent years in the Canadian Football League. Like, we have always known that this is a quarterback driven league, but one of the things that has become, I guess, part of my philosophy in putting a team together and so on is, I would say that probably almost as important as who's playing quarterback for you is who's coaching the quarterback.
Yeah.
And, and you look at what Jason Moss's history has been in this league, the success that he has had, from sort of his time as an assistant coach in Toronto, but especially when he became the offensive coordinator in Ottawa and moving on to the head coaching job in Edmonton and now continuing it with Saskatchewan. And so I think you're going to see Cody Fajardo take that next step, much as you saw Mike Riley and Trevor Harris really, really blossom under Jason Moss in previous stops. Henry Burris putting up fantastic numbers under Jason in Ottawa. That I think it's so important to have somebody coaching the quarterbacks who gets the most out of their quarterbacks, and I think Jason has proven to be one of those guys.
Well, I give you full credit for having the foresight and the scouting eye to be able to see Cody as a future guy, because I have to admit that when I saw Zach Collaros go down in week 1 of 2019, I'm calling that game on radio, and I see it happen. I see Cody go in, and Cody's in that game going from first read to second to throw it out of bounds. And there was a whole lot of throw it out of bounds or throw it at the feet of receivers. He was inaccurate. He was sporadic. He was just all over the place. And they're going into week 2, right? So now I've seen him even in basically a full game. They're going into week 2 against Saskatchewan at Ottawa in 2019. And I say the whole week, Dwayne, on radio, the entire week, oh, this Thursday nighter, this is going to be trash. What a bad game. Dominique Davis just threw 4 interceptions and won the game in Calgary. Cody Fajardo can't get through it to his third read. Like, oh, I'm sorry, CFL fans. This is going to suck. Probably the game of the year. Yeah. And of course, right, because the CFL that's just what it is at times, is like we were talking about earlier, unpredictable and not knowing what you're going to get out of people. But even when I had seen him play, it didn't click for me that he just needs time. He just needs something built around him. And Jeremiah Masoli
Yep.
was similar in that way, where when Condell had to deal with the injury to Claros on the torn ACL, he built something around him and went all the way to the East Final and was productive. And then he has to take a step back because Zach comes back in and it's back and forth. It took June Jones coming in, building the entire thing around Jeremiah before we actually got to see him be. So I'm always kind of confused by the way that we treat backup quarterbacks. And again, myself as being a culprit of this, where I say, well, he's just a backup because he's a short yardage guy. But then you really have to look and think, okay, but look at his actual skill set and imagine if something was built around him, then how would he look? Because that's clearly what Saskatchewan is doing now, and they're doing great being able to piece that together.
Yeah, well, I think you could make the argument that more than any other sport, that success in football is system driven, right? You look at the number of guys every year. I mean, we don't necessarily get a lot of Canadian quarterbacks to talk about in the CFL draft, but if you look south of the border, so many guys who are big time college quarterbacks who struggle in the National Football League. And then meanwhile, you've got guys who are late round picks or small school guys or whatever they may be who get there and thrive. And obviously, we get guys coming up here where it's a similar thing, where you would think, okay, well, I've got this quarterback coming to my CFL training camp who played at Ohio State and, received votes for the Heisman Trophy and won a national championship and this, that, and the other thing. This guy should be fantastic up here, and then there's this kid from a Division II school. We don't really need to talk about him, but we know how that story so often turns out in this league, that so much of it is about being a fit. And, I say this all the time. It's kind of about any position, but the nature of sports, so much of it is about being in the right place at the right time, where your skill set happens to be what a given coach values and is looking for. And it can be the difference between not making it through the preseason or having a 10-year career, is quite honestly just that element of luck, of being in the right place at the right time.
I always think of it this way because I grew up as a Brady lifer, just because he came around right at the point where I was learning what football really was and I got truly interested in it. Is if Mo Lewis doesn't make Drew Bledsoe's lungs bleed when the Jets and the Patriots played, Tom Brady's probably Luke McCown, right? Like, like he's a journeyman backup who teams love, and he's a good guy, and he'll keep you on the roster, and he'll win you 6-7 games. And now he might have gone on to do great things in other places, but to your point, it's about fit and system and opportunity, and Cody's certainly making the most of that. The last thing I want to ask you about here before I get you out, Dwayne, is it's finally time. It's time for you to peel back the curtain and tell everybody, what is your actual daily caloric intake?
You know what? It's actually probably a little less than it would have been had you asked me this in at the end of the 2019 season. But I mean, that being said, I have made an effort, as I've have finally had to acknowledge that I'm getting a little bit older. So I mean, this was kind of one of my things during the pandemic, was to to get into a good exercise routine, and quite frankly, be a little bit lighter, so that my hip joints aren't necessarily screaming at me as I'm walking up and down stadium steps and so on. So I have the mission for me, though, is that I love to eat. And so in that balance between exercise and diet, the thing for me has been try to exercise a lot more so that I only have to eat a little bit less.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I have never, quite honestly, never been a calorie counter, but I will admit that I am a guy who is quite comfortable eating, a family size pizza by myself, stacked with meat, or, I mean, we're in Ottawa this week, and Fat Boys is probably my favorite restaurant on the road. I will come right out and say that. Great barbecue place in the market in Ottawa. Love it. And
on the road or on the planet? Because I believe the way that you talk about it, that Fat Boys is your favorite restaurant on the planet.
You know what? It probably is. It probably is, quite honestly, my favorite restaurant on the planet. Great barbecue spot. And you get a variety of stuff. And so for anybody who has been there or is going there, I will tell you that my usual order when I go to Fat Boys is that I order a platter called the Kentucky Derby, and I get a side of wings. I always get a side of wings with it
because the Kentucky Derby's not enough, right? Like the
you
platter won't do it.
you can never have too much meat.
Okay.
And so, I will leave that to people to get out to Fat Boys themselves and check out the menu and understand what that is. And, it's funny because I know a lot of times the guys that I work with and, we end up obviously traveling together and eating out together on the road a lot. And guys will kind of make a big deal out of how much I eat. And, to me, it's sort of never really been a big deal. Like I know that I eat a lot, but I generally don't feel like I'm stuffing my face. Very rarely do I go to the point of the meat coma. I'm not going to say that I never have, but very rarely do I do that. And so it's this thing that has been now talked about on TV, I guess, for as long as I've been on TSN, because these guys were, I think, startled probably the first few times we went out to dinner together. And, to me, it has just kind of always been my thing. My mother was always a great cook when we were growing up. I love to cook myself. And so, I love to cook because I love to eat is basically my explanation on that.
I think that Fat Boys needs to rename the Kentucky Derby to the Duane Forde after all the free promotion that they've just got from here. You need to have your own dish, I think, on the on the menu that's out there. I would like, if you would, I have some fanfare here. Do you have a top 5 meals that Dwayne Forde likes to make that you are, because you say you like to cook, so now I got to put you to the test here. And after every one, I'll give it some fanfare to give it the production that it deserves, okay? At number 5, what does Dwayne Forde like to create?
Gosh, I'm not sure if I could necessarily go backwards, but I could throw some things out there for you.
Okay, number 5.
So, and this is the first one that comes to mind. So this is really kind of number 1. So I'm screwing up this whole segment. I know, but probably my number 1 thing would be prime rib, to cook a prime rib.
There you go, prime, and I'm guessing that are these all going to be barbecue? If I had to guess.
Well, my favorite purchase in of all the toys in my house probably is a few years ago I actually bought a smoker to keep my barbecue company out on the back deck. So the first thing you see, you walk out of the kitchen onto the deck, and there are my barbecue, my grill, and my smoker side by side, my pride and joy, with all due respect to my children. And yes, there are, sometimes I'll do the prime rib in the oven, but yeah, sometimes I will do it in the smoker.
Number 4.
Just did this week. I did about 4 pork shoulders. I did pulled pork on the smoker this week. That would be
there you go. Yeah, little pulled pork.
Yes, and the backstory on that, I guess, would be game day Saturday afternoon. I did the game in Toronto, but Saturday morning at probably about 2 a.m. after I'd watched the Calgary BC game. That was about when I took the pulled pork off the smoker. I had it on there all day, and training my son well. He had a couple of pulled pork sandwiches at about 3 in the morning.
Oh man, that's a Ford child move if I've ever heard of one. Number 3.
Oh, number 3. Wow. Well, you do have me in smoker mode. I do I'll cook whole chickens. Usually
dead or alive.
Go to Costco and get the club pack and 3 chickens. And yeah, we'll throw the three whole chickens on the smoker, and that will last us for a couple of meals.
That is amazing.
Now you have to let me think about these others as far as cooking at home. And I mean, there is no, notice I'm not bothering to mention the side dishes here, because the side dishes they're side dishes. They're not the main event for a reason.
Right? No, exactly. Number 2, do you have a 2 and a 1?
Yeah, even though they're probably really more like 4 and 5, I would say another favorite here in the Forde house would be to do chicken fingers. And I may not necessarily do the chicken fingers from scratch, because sometimes breading and frying and all of that, even oven baking them from scratch, that can be a lot of work. So sometimes it'll be cooking frozen chicken fingers, but we'll do the buffalo sauce is kind of the key.
Oh, wow.
And so, so I have a recipe that I quite like for buffalo sauce, whether for wings or fingers,
There we go.
Whatever we choose to go with.
This feels like an episode of Good Burger now, where it's not even about the meat; it's just about the sauce. You got the secret sauce that makes everything better. So now I understand why the meat all tastes so damn good in the Forde house.
Yes, that's key.
And the last one, number one. What do you got? The meal that Duane Forde likes to make.
Oh yeah, you know what? I got others now that you got me thinking. I have a great recipe for baked pork chops with stuffing. That's
wow.
Yeah, that's a family favorite. It's in mushroom soup. The many uses of Campbell's cream of mushroom soup, right? We'll sometimes do a roast that slow cooks in that. One of the things actually I learned, Marshall, now that you've got me on this food tangent, was I found a pretty good and easy recipe for chicken fried rice.
Oh, really?
That has become a little bit of a favorite, and honey garlic ribs that I will do to go with that. So yeah, there's a few more for you. I just need a little bit of time to think about it and
I like it.
Let people realize that my whole life is not spent with smoke billowing from the smoker on the back deck.
You know what, just to count it, because we are attempting to be an equal opportunity and respective of everybody's cultures and backgrounds and everything else. I told Dwayne before we started this for the first time that I have been vegan for a little while. Now, not religious about it, because I still have eggs and I have fish once in a while and all that, but I eat a lot of vegetables and nuts and seeds and all the rest. So here's my top 5 meals that I like to make, okay?
Here we go.
It is, at number 5, Fiesta Salsa Black Bean Burgers. Can't go wrong with a good black bean burger. The secret is really putting enough of the rolled oats in there that it sticks nicely and you can get some size to it, I think. At number 4, it is a roasted chickpea lentil Caesar salad. Which, weird that capers actually go into the Caesar dressing that you make. I did not know that when you make the Caesar dressing from scratch, there's some weird stuff that goes into there. Thankfully, it's not olive paste like you get from the other places. At number 3, we do this great bok choy peanut butter tofu bowl. That's a good one too. Yeah, that's the straining of the tofu is nice. At number 2, this is my personal favorite when I am watching a Formula One race on Sunday mornings. Roasted sweet potato alongside tempeh, which is just fake bacon, alongside roasted chickpeas with avocado and a couple of eggs. And at number 1, the number 1 meal that I make to counter Duane Forde's incredible list of smokers and meat and everything else, once in a while, I'll just chew on a single pumpkin seed. It really gets you through the day. So.
Yes. Viewers compare and contrast. Yeah, and to be fair, quite honestly, I am a carnivore at heart, 100%. But I genuinely like food. So if something tastes good, it tastes good. So I mean, no question, there's lots of vegan stuff out there that is terrific. I enjoy salads regularly, contrary to popular belief.
Well, it's not fair, Dwayne, because I've only seen you eat at Fat Boys in Ottawa, so I've never seen a salad, which is an unfair judgment of you. But I think anybody who sees
I actually, when with the Kentucky Derby platter,
does it come with it?
I get to choose sides, and I do always choose the boring green salad.
Coleslaw is not a salad, Dwayne. Okay.
No, this is just like a house salad. Usually a little balsamic dressing, and that's just eases my guilty conscience while I'm shoveling various meats into my face.
Delightful. It's amazing that you can call games after eating all of that, but at the same time, pro's pro, and everybody knows when they see you on camera that you look great and you're great at doing your job, man. Thank you for doing this. The last thing I'll say I learned from Chris Cuthbert was that he said, hey, just so you know, us play-by-play guys, we don't have to be smart. We're not even supposed to be smart. We're supposed to tee up the people that are smarter than us. So for anybody out there who thinks that Dwayne and I are going to get into a CFL draft history off on Saturday night, I'm sad to disappoint you, but I will be setting up the action and passing it to my partner in the booth as quickly as possible. So
I'm gonna suck you into a little bit of draft history.
Okay, good. Challenge accepted, and now we left an Easter egg for everybody in the listening audience here. Dwayne, thank you so much for this. It's great to catch up with you, and I can't wait to work together.
Hey, my pleasure, Marcia. It's been a long time coming. Let's have some fun on Saturday.